Hello everyone, and welcome to the Unanswered Questions True Crime Podcast.
I have spent hours and hours investigating this.
He basically told her that people have been killed. Journalists, independent investigators, people like that disappeared. It frightened her to the bone.
There's more to the story than meets the eye.
There were rumors of torture and homicide and sexual abuse, all sorts of egregious, horrendous crimes.
He was polygraphed 3 times. Each of those 3 showed evasions.
His resumes were a skeleton of truth.
He was mad at the world, and particularly mad at the government.
The study that he commissioned described a fictional terrorist attack.
If people have died over this, it means you're getting close to the truth.
You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to say, what the fuck?
It is a beautiful and priceless collection. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of art housed inside these walls. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. Visitors from all over the world come to see these masterpieces, but that's not all they're looking at. They are also looking at a crime scene. In fact, a crime scene from the biggest art heist in history, still unsolved. And this is all that's left.
Come in, clock in, there would be 2 guards.
Rick Abbott was one of the night watchmen on duty the night of the crime.
Cops rang the doorbell. They said, Boston police, we got a report of a disturbance on the premises. So I buzzed them in. The cop that was dealing with me turned to me and said, don't I know you? Don't I recognize you? I think there's a warrant out for your arrest. Can you step out from behind the desk?
He steps away from the security desk and away from the panic button. His only way to contact the outside world. His only way to prevent what was about to happen. In a matter of minutes, the 2 thieves had both night watchmen completely under their control.
He finished cuffing me and he cuffed my partner and very dramatically said, gentlemen, this is a robbery.
The thieves lead Rick and his partner down to the basement to different areas. It all happened so fast, he never had a chance to hit the one panic button by the guard desk. He knew no one was coming to help. Did the thieves know that as well? It appears they did, since they were in no rush to get out.
Path is interesting. They took the guards after they handcuffed them and taped them and brought them into the basement. About 24 minutes elapsed, though, before we see them again.
Motion detectors placed throughout the building picked up their trail for nearly an hour and a half. But that didn't matter. Those motion detectors weren't connected to police outside. They only alert the guard sitting at the computer by the entrance. A computer that was now unmanned.
It's in this hallway where we see the first motion detectors go off, so that's how we know that it was 24 minutes. So it's about 1:48, and they're walking down this hallway together, and they enter the Dutch room.
Which is right there.
Exactly, and from the Dutch room they took 6 pieces, and that's where,
including the Rembrandts.
The 3 Rembrandts, the Vermeer, and the Flinck, and the Chinese vessel.
The real work had begun for the thieves, but as they get ready to remove Rembrandt's Storm on the Sea of Galilee, his only seascape, a high-pitched alarm sounds. Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Stephen Kirkjian has investigated this case for the Boston Globe for decades. He says this alarm was designed to keep visitors from getting too close to the Rembrandt.
That seascape, even if you look at prints of it now, images of it now, you will see a vision, an etching of Rembrandt himself. Art experts, art specialists, common folk knew that, and they would come up and they would put their finger close to, point out the image of Rembrandt, and if they got too close, then the alarm would sound.
Like the motion detectors, this alarm was not connected to the outside world. But did the thieves know that as well? Because they didn't pack up and leave at that point. They continued on with their crime, and they took their time.
Same path backwards, goes through the early Italian room, the Raphael room, all the while passing incredibly priceless art.
At 2:41 a.m., the door to the museum opens and closes. The thieves were gone.
Once they leave, they've never heard from again.
Randy joins us now. I mean, this is really one of the biggest mysteries in the history of the art world. They finally do have a lead on what happened?
That's what they're saying now. Investigators are saying that the big news today is that they've seen the artwork. They have confirmed sightings of the artwork. And this is a really big deal, as you said, because this art is worth at least $500 million. And for years, investigators have feared that, well, maybe whoever took it put it in a basement or an attic, maybe for safekeeping, and maybe that person died or got killed if they were a bad person, and it was never to be found. So this is a really big break.
I mean, I remember last year, investigators had said that there was a break. They'd identified the suspects. They didn't actually name them. What are they saying today?
They are naming them now. 3 suspects, 2 of which are dead. One is Carmelo Merlino. He died in prison. And what investigators are saying is that he talked with undercover FBI agents many, many years ago and told them that he had some of this artwork, including the Rembrandt that we just saw there, and he said that he was going to return it to the museum and ask for the reward. Well, that never happened. Another person they're naming now is Robert Gentile. He's actually alive in prison on another charge. He has always said that he had nothing to do with this. But Anderson, they did search his home years ago on drug charges, and they said that they found items that they believe relates him to the museum heist. Items like a police badge, clothing with a police insignia on it, handcuffs, scanners, two-way radios, things that might have been used. Because remember, there was a third name. I don't have it right here with me, but that person is also dead as well.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Money Podcast Unanswered Questions, where every week we'll endeavour to discuss a mysterious unsolved case that has many lingering unanswered questions. So I hope you enjoy, and as always, leave me some feedback on what you think about the show and rate it as well. Now on to the show. This week we'll be talking about the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum theft.
It's been 23 years since 13 priceless works of art were stolen from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. Now the Gardner and the FBI have rolled out a public appeal similar to the one launched just prior to Whitey Bulger's capture, and it comes complete with wanted posters. These FBI posters do not sport the usual most wanted suspects. Instead, they display Vermeers, Degas, and Rembrandts, all in an effort to get someone to come forward with what they know about the most significant art heist in history. Now, Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum Director Anne Hawley is opening up about the loss.
The theft was such a painful and horrible moment in the museum's life.
Until now, Hawley has said little about the theft and what happened in the immediate aftermath.
We also were being threatened from the outside by criminals who wanted attention from the FBI, and so they were threatening us and threatening putting bombs in the museum. We were evacuating the museum. Staff members were under threat. No one knew really what kind of a cauldron we were in.
Meanwhile, the FBI has followed thousands of leads worldwide, from Europe to Ireland to Japan, and they believe they know who might have taken the art. I am joined now by one of the lead investigators into the Gardner heist. Jeff Kelly is a special agent in the FBI's Boston field office and a member of the Art Crime Unit. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
And
nice
you've
to be
been
here.
involved with this for at least 10 years.
It's actually 11 years now that I've been the investigator on this case.
All right. I watched the entire public service that you've put out a couple times now, because it was out. It's been out almost a year ago. And you say in there that you essentially know who did it. Why can't you say?
Well, you know, we have to temper what we put out there in the public. You know, certainly we want to get the assistance of the public, and we felt it was important to kind of lay our cards out on the table and say we know who did it, and we know who was involved, but we need your help. For us we still have an investigation here, and we still have to preserve the integrity of the investigation. And because of that, we can't tell you everything. And I know it's kind of a little tantalizing to put that out there and not be able to follow it up and say this is who we think did it.
Have you talked to the person?
We've certainly spoken to a lot of people. We've spoken to the people that we think might have been involved, and we've spoken to some other people. It's gotten us to where we are right now. And basically, we need the help of the public. We've used it before, and it's been great, and we continue to try and solicit the help from the public.
Anne Hawley told us, and we'd never heard that before, that right after the heist that there was all kinds of bomb threats and the museum was threatened, and I didn't know anything about that. Explain that. What happened?
Yeah, there were certainly, when you have a case of this magnitude, people are going to come out of the woodwork. That's what happened shortly after the case. It happened over the years, where people came forward either claiming to have information about the theft or coming forward to try and extort some money out of the museum. So this has been such an unusual investigation. I've been working it for 11 years, but obviously it's been almost 24 years since it happened. And it's run the gamut of everything from an art investigation to a drug investigation to extortion investigation. I mean, it's really encompassed every type of federal statute that you could think of.
The former Boston Herald reporter Tom Ashburg, as you well know, has a great tale, of being essentially blindfolded and taken to a place where he was unrolled, somebody unrolled something, and then he got some chips and had them. Do you think that there was any credibility, any possibility that what he saw was one of the real pieces?
I know Tom, and he has utmost integrity, but from what I've learned about the art itself, I don't think that what he saw was the actual painting. He described it as being unrolled, kind of unfurled, but from speaking to the experts, both at the museum and at other museums, the paintings are so thick that they would really be almost impossible to roll up. And if you were to, they kind of have the consistency of cardboard. And because of that, that's one of those things when we get tips, and we get a number of tips, you can kind of vet those out right at the beginning when somebody says somebody unrolled it like a poster, took it out of a tube. That's a kind of a popular Hollywood conception, but it really isn't accurate when you're describing these paintings, which are really hundreds of years old.
Do you think that they are still in existence, and do you think that they're together? Because it was 13 objects, and some of them were odd objects. They weren't all paintings. Right. Do you think that they're together?
I don't know if they're still together. I think they're all in existence. That's one of the, you have to be cynical in this position, and certainly one of the things that we had to look at was, did these paintings get destroyed right after? When these guys woke up and they realized that they committed the heist of the century, did they panic and destroy them? And that's why we haven't seen them. It's a possibility, it's a slim possibility, but we've had confirmed sightings of some of these pieces throughout the 90s and into the early 2000s, and that really gives us a comfort level that if these paintings had not been destroyed then, they're still in existence today.
All right, well, we're going to stay on this story because it's endlessly fascinating.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having
Jeff
me.
Kelly.
Thank you.
In the earlier morning hours of March 18, 1990, 13 works of art were stolen from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. Guards admitted 2 men posing as police officers responding to a disturbance call, and the thieves bound the guards and looted the museum over the next hour. The case is unsolved, no arrests have ever been made, and no works have ever been recovered. The stolen works have been valued at hundreds of millions of dollars by the FBI and various art dealers. The museum offers a $10 million reward for information leading to the art's recovery, the largest bounty ever offered by a private institution. The stolen works were originally procured by art collector Isabella Stewart Gardner, who was born in 1840 and died in 1924, and were intended for permanent display at the museum with the rest of her collection. Among them was The Concert, one of only 34 known paintings by Johannes Vermeer, and thought to be the most valuable unrecovered painting in the world. Also missing is The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, Rembrandt's only seascape. Other paintings and sketches by Rembrandt, Edgar Degas, Édouard Manet, and Govert Flinck were stolen, along with a relatively valueless eagle finial and Chinese goo. I am so sorry if I get any of these names wrong, ladies and gentlemen. Experts were puzzled by the choice of artwork, as more valuable works were left untouched. As the collection and its layout are intended to be permanent, empty frames remain hanging both in homage to the missing works and as a placeholder for their return. The FBI believes that the robbery was planned by a criminal organization. The case lacks strong physical evidence, and the FBI has largely depended on interrogations, undercover informants, and sting operations to collect information. It is focused primarily on the Boston Mafia, which was in the midst of an internal gang war during the period. One theory holds that gangster Bobby Donati organized the heist to negotiate for his Kappa regime's release from prison. Donati was murdered 1 year after the robbery. Other accounts suggest that the paintings were stolen by a gang in Boston's Dorchester neighborhood, although these suspects deny involvement despite the fact that a sting operation resulted in several prison sentences. All have denied any knowledge or have provided leaves that proved fruitless, despite the offer of reward money and reduced or cancelled prison sentences if they had disclosed information, leading to the recovery of the artworks. Again, I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, if I get any names wrong in this podcast episode. I'm not very good at pronouncing some of these names, so I do greatly apologize if I pronounce any of these names or places wrong throughout this and other podcasts. Thank you. Now we get into the background of this case. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum was constructed under the guidance of art collector Isabella Stewart Gardner, born in 1840 and died in 1924, to house her personal art collection. The museum opened to the public in 1903, and Gardner continued to expand the collection and arrange it until she died in 1924. She left the museum with a $3.6 million endowment, and her will stipulated that the arrangement of the artwork should not be altered and that no items were to be sold from or purchased into the collection. By the 1980s, the museum was running low on funds. This financial strain left the museum in poor condition. It lacked a climate control system and an insurance policy, and it was in need of basic building maintenance. After the FBI uncovered a plot by Boston criminals to rob the museum in 1982, the museum allocated funds to improve security. Among these improvements were 60 infrared motion detectors and a closed-circuit television system consisting of 4 cameras placed around the building's perimeter. No cameras had been installed inside the museum, as its board of trustees considered the cost prohibitive, but additional security guards were hired. Despite these security improvements, the only manner in which guards could summon police to the museum was by pressing a button at the security desk. Other museums had fail-safe systems that required night watchmen to place hourly phone calls with the police to indicate that conditions were normal. An independent consultant reviewed the museum's security operations in 1988 and determined that they were on par with most other museums, but recommended improvements. The security director at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston also suggested security upgrades to the museum. Because of the museum's financial strain and Gardner's directive forbidding major renovations, the Board of Trustees did not approve these security enhancements. The board also denied a request from the security director for higher guard salaries in a bid to attract more qualified applicants. The museum's security guards were paid slightly higher than minimum wage, and the museum's security flaws were an open secret among the guards. Now we get into the robbery and the prelude. The robbery occurred in the early hours of Sunday, March 18th of 1990. The thieves were first witnessed around 12:30 a.m. by several St. Patrick's Day revelers leaving a party near the museum. The 2 men were disguised as police officers and parked in a hatchback on Palace Road, about 100 feet from the side entrance. The witnesses believed them to be policemen. The museum guards on duty that night were Rick Abarth, aged 23, and Randy Heastand, aged 25. Abarth was a regular night watchman, but March 18th was Heastand's first time on the night shift. The museum's security policy required that one guard would patrol the galleries with a flashlight and walkie-talkie, while the other would sit at the security desk. When Abarth took the first patrol, fire alarms sounded in several rooms, but he could not locate any fire or smoke. He returned to the security room where the fire alarm control panel indicated smoke in multiple rooms. He assumed that some type of malfunction had occurred and disabled the panel before returning to his patrol. Before completing his rounds, Abarth stopped at the side entrance of the museum, briefly opening the side door and shutting it again without informing Heastand. Abarth returned to the security desk around 1 a.m. and Heastand assumed patrol duties. Now we get to the guards being subdued. At 1:20 a.m, the thieves drove to the side entrance, parked and walked to the side door. They rang the buzzer which connected them to Abarth through an intercom. They explained to Abarth that they were police investigating a disturbance and they must be admitted. Abarth could see them on the closed-circuit television wearing what appeared to be police uniforms. He was not aware of any disturbance, but he assumed that a St. Patrick's Day reveller may have climbed over the fence, causing someone to report it to the police. Abarth admitted the men at 1:24 a.m. The thieves first entered a locked foyer that separated the side door from the museum. They approached Abarth at the security desk and asked if anyone else was in the museum. Abarth radioed Heastand to return to the security desk. Abarth noticed around this time that the taller man's moustache appeared to be fake. The shorter man told Abarth that he looked familiar and that they may have a warrant for his arrest. Demanding that Abarth emerge from behind the desk to provide identification, Abarth complied, leaving the desk that contained the museum's only panic button to alert police. The shorter man forced Abarth against a wall, spread his leg and handcuffed him. Heastand walked into the room around this time and the taller thief turned him toward the wall and handcuffed him. With both guards handcuffed, the thieves revealed their true intentions to rob the museum and asked the guards not to cause any problems. The thieves wrapped duct tape around the heads and eyes of the guards without asking for directions. They led the guards into the basement where the guards were handcuffed to a steam pipe and workbench. The thieves examined the guards' wallets and threatened that they knew where the guards lived and told them that if they would not inform the authorities, they would receive a reward in about a year. It took the thieves less than 15 minutes to subdue the guards, which they completed at about 1:35 a.m. Now we get into them stealing the works of art. The thieves' movements through the museum were recorded on infrared motion detectors. Steps in the first room they entered, the Dutch room on the second floor, were not recorded until 1:48 a.m. This was 13 minutes after they had finished subduing the guards, perhaps waiting to ensure that police had not been alerted. As the thieves approached the paintings in the Dutch room, a sensor sounded that was intended to alert when patrons moved too close to artwork, and the thieves smashed the device. They removed the Storm of the Sea of Galilee and a lady and gentleman in black from the wall and threw them on the marble floor, shattering their glass frames. Using a blade, they cut the canvases out of their stretchers. They also removed a large Rembrandt self-portrait oil painting from the wall, but left it leaning against a cabinet. Investigators believe that the thieves may have considered it too large to transport, potentially because it was painted on wood and not canvas like the others. The thieves instead took a small postage stamp-sized self-portrait etching by Rembrandt on display beneath the larger portrait. On the right side of the room, they removed landscape with obelisk and the concert from their frames. The final piece taken from the room was an ancient Chinese gu. At 1:51 a.m, while one thief continued working in the Dutch room, the other entered a narrow hallway dubbed the short gallery on the other end of the second floor. Soon both men were in the short gallery, where they began removing screws from a frame displaying a Napoleonic flag, likely an effort to steal the flag. They appeared to have abandoned the effort, as some screws were not removed, and they ultimately took only the exposed eagle finial atop the flagpole. They also took 5 Degas sketches from the room. The last work stolen was Ches Tortoni from the Blue Room on the first floor. The museum's motion detectors did not detect any motion within the Blue Room during the thieves' time in the building. The only footsteps detected in the room that night were Abath's during the 2 times when he passed through the gallery on his earlier patrol. As they had prepared to leave, the thieves checked the guards again and asked if they were comfortable. The thieves then moved to the security director's office, where they took the video cassettes that contained evidence of their entrance from the closed-circuit cameras, as well as the data printouts from the motion detecting equipment. The movement data was also captured on a hard drive, which remained untouched. The frame for Ches Tortoni was left at the security director's desk. The thieves then began to remove the artwork from the museum. The side entrance doors were opened at 2:40 a.m. and again for the last time at 2:45 a.m. The robbery lasted only 81 minutes. The next guard shift arrived later in the morning and realized that something was amiss when they could not establish contact with anyone inside for admittance. They called the security director, who entered the building with his keys, and found nobody at the watch desk before calling the police. The police searched the building and found the guards still bound in the basement. Now we're going to go through all of the works of art that were stolen. So first we have The Concert by Vermeer, The Storm on the Sea of Galilee by Rembrandt, A Lady and Gentleman in Black by Rembrandt, Landscape with Obelisk by Flinck, Ches Tortoni Manet, Self-Portrait Rembrandt, La Sortie de Passage by Degas, I'm going to butcher these names, I'm so sorry, Cortège aux Environs de Florence by Degas, Program for an Artistic Sortie 1 Degas, Program for an Artistic Sortie 2 by Degas, 3 Mounted Jockeys by Degas, an ancient Chinese gu, and a French imperial eagle finial. 13 works were stolen in total, and in 1990 the FBI estimated the value of the theft at $200 million and raised the estimate to $500 million by 2000. In the late 2000s, some art dealers suggested that the total value of the stolen artwork could be as much as $600 million. It is considered the highest value museum robbery in history. The most valuable works were taken from the Dutch room. Among those was The Concert by Dutch painter Vermeer, 1632 to 1675, one of only 34 paintings attributed to him. The painting accounts for half of the overall theft's value, estimated at a whopping $250 million as of 2015. Experts believe that The Concert may be the most valuable stolen object in the world. In the same room, the thieves targeted works by Dutch painter Rembrandt, 1606 to 1669. These include The Storm of the Sea of Galilee, his only seascape, and the most valuable of his works stolen that night. Estimates have placed its value at about $140 million. The other Rembrandt works taken were A Lady and a Gentleman in Black and a small postage stamp-sized self-portrait etching. The latter was previously stolen and returned in 1970. The thieves may have taken Landscape with Obelisk, believing that it was a Rembrandt. It was long attributed to him until it was quietly credited to his pupil Govert Flinck, 1615 to 1660, a few years before the heist. The last item taken from the Dutch room was a bronze goo about 10 inches, 25 centimeters tall. Traditionally used for serving wine in ancient China, the beaker was one of the oldest works in the museum, dating to the Shang dynasty in the 12th century BC. Its estimated value is several $1,000s. In the short gallery, 5 sketches by French artist Edgar Degas, 1834 to 1917, were stolen. They were each drawn on paper less than a square foot in size and made with pencils, inks, washes, and charcoal. They are of relatively little value compared with the other works stolen, worth less than $100,000 combined. Also taken was a 10-inch tall, 25-centimeter French imperial eagle finial from the corner of a framed flag for Napoleon's Imperial Guard. There is a $100,000 reward for information leading to the return of the finial alone. It possibly appeared to be made of gold to the thieves. Ches Tortoni by French painter Édouard Manet, 1832 to 1883, sorry if I get that name wrong, was taken from the Blue Room. It was the only item taken from the first floor. The eclectic mix of items has puzzled experts. While some of the paintings were valuable, the thieves passed other valuable works by Raphael, Botticelli, and Michelangelo and left them undisturbed, opting to take relatively valueless items such as the goo and the finial. The thieves did not enter the third floor where Titian's The Rape of Europa hung, which is among the most valuable paintings in the city. The selection of works and the thieves' rough treatment of the artwork has led investigators to believe that the thieves were not experts commissioned to steal particular works. As Gardner's will decreed that nothing in a collection should be moved, the empty frames for the stolen paintings remain hanging in their respective locations in the museum as placeholders for their potential return, if ever. Because of the museum's low funds and lack of an insurance policy, the director solicited help from Sotheby's and Christie's auction houses to post a reward of $1 million within 3 days. This was increased to $5 million in 1997. In 2017, it was doubled to $10 million with an expiration date set for the end of the year. This reward was extended following an outpouring of tips from the public. It is the largest bounty ever offered by a private institution. The reward is for information that leads directly to the recovery of all of their items in good condition. End quote. Federal prosecutors have stated that anyone who willingly returns the items will not be prosecuted. The statute of limitations expired in 1995 as well, so the thieves and anyone else who participated in the theft cannot be prosecuted. Now we get into the early leads of the case and people of interest. The FBI took immediate control of the case on the grounds that the artwork would likely cross state lines. Investigators have called the case unique for its lack of strong physical evidence. It is unknown if the thieves left DNA evidence. Although fingerprints and footprints were found at the scene, it could not be concluded whether they were from the thieves or from museum employees. The FBI has performed DNA analysis in the years following the thefts as advancements in the field have grown. Some of the evidence has been lost among the agency's files, however. The guards and witnesses in the street described one thief as about 5 feet 9 inches, 1.75 meters, to 5 foot 10 inches, 1.78 meters tall in his late 30s with a medium build, and the other had 6 feet 0 inches, 1.83 meters, to 6 feet 1 inch, 1.85 meters in his early 30s with a heavier build. Now we come to Rick Abarth. Security guard Richard Edward Abarth was investigated at an early stage because of his suspicious behaviour on the night of the theft. Now, these included such things as, while on patrol, Abarth briefly opened and closed a side door, a move that some believe could have been a signal to the thieves parked outside. Abarth told authorities that he opened and closed the door routinely to ensure that it was locked. One of Abarth's colleagues told journalists that if Abarth had opened the door routinely as he maintained, supervisors would have noticed him doing so from their computer printouts and stopped the behaviour. Now, also, suspicion has surrounded the museum's motion detectors, which did not detect any movement in the Blue Room, which housed Ches Tortoni, during the time the thieves were in the museum. The only footsteps in the room that night were Abarth's during his security patrol. A security consultant reviewed the motion detector equipment several weeks after the theft and determined they were operating correctly. Also, in 2015, the FBI released a security video from the museum on the night before the theft, showing Abarth admitting an unidentified man into the museum to converse at the security desk. Abarth told investigators that he could not recall the incident or recognize the man, and the FBI requested the public's assistance. Several former museum guards came forward and identified the stranger as the museum's deputy security chief. Abarth, who died in 2024 at age 57, maintained his innocence throughout his life. The FBI agent overseeing the case in its early years concluded that the guards were too incompetent and foolish to have committed the crime. Now we come to one of the most well-known crime bosses and criminals in Boston, that being Whitey Bulger. Whitey Bulger was one of the most powerful crime bosses in Boston during the era heading the Winter Hill Gang. He denied involvement and in fact dispatched his subordinates to identify the culprits because the robbery was committed within his area and he wanted to be paid tribute. FBI agent Thomas McShane investigated Bulger to determine his involvement. He determined that Bulger's strong ties with the Boston police could explain how the thieves acquired legitimate police uniforms, or perhaps that real police were arranged to perform the heist. Bulger has also had ties to the Irish Republican Army IRA. McShane identified the act of tipping the fire alarm before the heist as a calling card of the IRA and of its rival Ulster Volunteer Force UVF. Both organisations had agents in Boston at the time, and both had previously demonstrated the capability to organise art heists. McShane's investigation of Bulger and the IRA did not produce any evidence to tie them to the theft. According to Charlie Hill, a retired art and antiquities investigator for Scotland Yard, Bulger gave the Gardner works to the IRA, and they're most likely in Ireland. I do apologise if I get these names wrong, ladies and gentlemen, as I said before. My pronunciation's not too good. Now we come to the 1994 letter to the museum. In 1994, museum director Anne Hawley received an anonymous letter from someone who claimed to be attempting to negotiate a return of the artwork. The writer explained that they were a third-party negotiator and did not know the identity of the thieves. They explained that the artwork was stolen to reduce a prison sentence, but as the opportunity had passed, there was no longer a motive to keep the artwork and they wanted to negotiate a return. The writer explained that the artwork was being held in a non-common law country under climate-controlled conditions. They wanted immunity for themselves and all others involved and $2.6 million for the return of the artwork, which would be sent to an offshore bank account at the same time the art was handed over. If the museum was interested in negotiating, they should print a coded message in the Boston Globe. To establish credence, the writer conveyed information only known by the museum and the FBI at the time. Hawley felt this was a strong lead. She contacted the FBI, who then contacted the Globe. The coded message was printed on May 1st of 1994 edition of the Boston Globe. Hawley received a second letter a few days later in which the writer acknowledged the museum was interested in negotiating, but that they had become fearful of what they perceived was a massive investigation by federal and state authorities to determine their identity. The writer explained that they needed time to evaluate their options, but Hawley never heard from the writer again. Now we come to a guy by the name of Brian McDevitt. Brian McDevitt was a conman from Boston who tried to rob the Hyde Collection in Glens Falls, New York in 1981. He dressed up as a FedEx driver, carried handcuffs and duct tape, and planned to steal a Rembrandt. He was also a known flag aficionado and fit the description of the larger robber except for his thinning red hair. These parallels to the Gardner case fascinated the FBI, so much so that they interviewed him in late 1990. McDevitt denied any involvement and refused to take a polygraph test, which are notoriously unreliable. The FBI ran his fingerprints, which did not match any of those at the crime scene. McDevitt later moved to California and conned his way into television and film writing. He died in 2004. Now we come to the investigation of the Boston Mafia. First we have the Molino gang. The FBI announced significant progress in their investigation in March of 2013. They reported with a high degree of confidence that they identified the thieves, which they believe were members of a criminal organization based in the mid-Atlantic of New England. They also felt with that same confidence that the artwork was transported to Connecticut and Philadelphia in the years following the theft, with an attempted sale in Philadelphia in 2002. Their knowledge of what happened after that is limited, and they requested the public's help to locate and return the artwork. In 2015, the FBI stated both thieves were deceased. Though the FBI did not publicly identify any individuals, sources familiar with the investigation said they were associated with a gang from Dorchester. The gang was loyal to Boston Mafia boss Frank Salmi and ran their operations out of an automobile repair shop run by criminal Carmelo Molino. Sorry if I get any of these guys' names wrong. I don't mean any disrespect. Molino's associates may have gained knowledge of the museum's weaknesses after gangster Luis Royce cased it as early as 1981. He devised plans with an associate to light up smoke bombs and rush the galleries amidst the confusion. In 1982, when undercover FBI agents were investigating Royce and his associate for an unrelated art theft, they learned of their interest in robbing the Gardner Museum and warned the museum of the gang's plan. Royce was in prison at the time of the robbery, and Royce shared his plans with others and believed associate Stefan Rossetti may have ordered the robbery or shared it with someone else. Then we come to Robert Guarenti and Robert Gentile. Sorry if I get those names wrong. Among those associated with the Molino gang were Robert Garante and Manchester, Connecticut gangster Robert Gentile. Garante died from cancer in 2004, but his widow Aline told the FBI in 2010 that her husband had previously owned some of the paintings. She claimed that when her husband got sick with cancer in the early 2000s, he gave the paintings to Gentile for safekeeping. Gentile denied the accusations, claiming he was never given them and knew nothing of their whereabouts. Federal authorities indicted Gentile on drug charges in 2012, likely in an attempt to pressure Gentile for information about the Gardner works. He submitted to a polygraph test which indicated he was lying when he denied any knowledge of the theft or the location of the artwork. Gentile maintained he was telling the truth and demanded a retest. Well, during the retest, he said Elaine had once shown him the missing Rembrandt self-portrait, to which the polygraph machine indicated he was telling the truth. Gentile's lawyer felt that the veracity of Gentile's claims were being affected by the large presence of federal agents and requested a smaller meeting in hopes that it would get Gentile to speak honestly. In the more immediate meeting, Gentile maintained that he did not have any information. A few days later, the FBI stormed Gentile's house in Manchester with a search warrant. The FBI found a secret ditch beneath a false floor in the backyard shed, but found it empty. Gentile's son explained that the ditch flooded a few years prior and his father was upset about whatever was stored there. In the basement, they found a copy of the Boston Herald from March 1990, reporting the theft along with a piece of paper indicating what each piece might sell for on the black market. Beyond this, no conclusive evidence was found to indicate he ever had the paintings. Gentile went to prison for 30 months on drug charges. If he knew information about the theft, at no point did he opt to share it, which would have reduced his sentence or freed him from prison. After getting out of prison, he spoke with investigative reporter Stefan, and I'm going to butcher this name, Kirkjan, claiming he was framed by the FBI. Sorry if I get that name wrong. He explained how the imprisonment was detrimental to his finances and personal life. He also explained that the list found in his basement was written up by a criminal trying to broker a return of the work from Garante and was talking to Gentile as an intermediary. When asked about what could have been in the ditch, Gentile could not recall, but believed it could have been small motors. Now we come to David Turner. David Turner was another associate of Molino. The FBI began investigating him in 1992 when a source told them Turner had access to the paintings. Molino was arrested that same year for cocaine trafficking and told authorities that he could return the paintings for a reduced prison sentence. He asked Turner to track down the paintings. Turner failed to return them, though he heard they were in church in South Boston. Another associate arrested in the drug sting told authorities about Turner's involvement in several break-ins, but never mentioned the Gardner heist. Based on conversations with Molino after his release from prison in the mid-1990s, authorities gathered that Molino never had direct access to the paintings, but could possibly broker for their return. Despite his claims of innocence, the FBI believes he may have been one of the thieves. Evidence indicates that he went to Florida to pick up a cocaine order just days before the heist, and credit card records suggest he remained there through the night of the robbery, but some investigators believe this may have been Turner's attempt at creating an alibi. The FBI thinks the other thief was his friend and Molino associate George Resfelder. He died in July of 1991. No clues were found in his apartment or the homes of friends and relatives, but his siblings recall a painting similar to Ches Tortoni in his bedroom. Investigators believe he looks similar to the slimmer man in the police sketches. In 1999, the FBI arrested Turner, Molino, Rossetti, and others in a sting operation the day they planned to rob a Loomis Fargo vault. When the FBI brought Turner in for questioning, they told him they had information that he participated in the Gardner robbery and that if he returned the paintings, they would let him go. He told the authorities he did not know who stole the paintings nor where they could be hidden. In his 2001 trial, he claimed entrapment, that the FBI let the Loomis Fargo plot proceed so they could pressure him for information about the Gardner paintings. The jury found him guilty and he was sent to prison. Turner knew Gentile through Durante. In 2010, he wrote a letter to Gentile asking if he could call Turner's former girlfriend to assist in recovering the Gardner paintings. In cooperation with the FBI, Gentile spoke with Turner's girlfriend and she told him that Turner wanted him to speak with two of his ex-convict friends in Boston. The FBI wanted Gentile to meet the men and send an FBI undercover agent with him, but Gentile did not want to cooperate further. Turner was freed in November 2019, 1 month after Rossetti. Molino died in prison in 2005. Now we come to Bobby Donati. Criminal Bobby Donati was murdered in 1991 in the midst of a gang war within the Patricia crime family. Sorry if I get that name wrong. His involvement in the Gardner theft was suspected after notorious New England art thief Miles J. Connor Jr. spoke with authorities. Connor was in jail at the time of the heist, but he believed Donati and criminal David Horton were the masterminds. Connor had worked with Donati in past art heists and claimed that the two cased the Gardner Museum, where Donati took interest in the finale. Connor also claimed that Horton visited him in jail after the heist and said that he and Donati organised it, were going to use the paintings to get Connor out of jail. If this is true, they likely borrowed the idea from Connor, as he had returned art to reduce sentences in the past. Even though Donati and Horton's appearances did not fit the witness descriptions, Connor suggested they probably hired lower-level gangsters to carry out the robbery. Like Donati, Horton also died within 2 years of the robbery, though from an illness rather than murder. Connor told investigators that he could assist in returning the Gardner works in exchange for the museum's posted reward and his freedom. When investigators did not give in to Connor's demands because of lack of evidence, he suggested they speak with criminal and antiquities dealer William P. Youngworth. Acting on Connor's lead, the FBI opened a case on Youngworth and conducted raids on his home and antiquities store properties in the 1990s. The raids caught the attention of journalist Tom Mashberg, who began talking with Youngworth in 1997 about the theft. One night in August of 1997, Youngworth called Mashberg and told him that he had proof he could return the Gardner paintings under the right conditions. That night, Youngworth picked up Mashberg from the Boston Herald offices and drove him to a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Youngworth led him inside to a storage unit with several large cylinder tubes. He removed one painting from its tube, unfurled it, and showed it to Mashberg under flashlight. It appeared to Mashberg to be the storm of the Sea of Galilee. He noticed cracking along the canvas, and the edges were cut in a manner consistent with the museum's reports, and he noticed Rembrandt's signature on the ship's rudder. Mashberg wrote about his experience in the Boston Herald, leaving out details to hide Youngworth's identity and the painting's location. He reported that his informant, presumably Youngworth, told him the robbery was pulled off by 5 men and identified 2. Donati was one of the robbers, and Horton was responsible for moving the art to a safe house. The FBI discovered the location of the warehouse several months later and raided it, finding nothing. The veracity of Youngworth's claims and the authenticity of the paintings shown to Mashberg is disputed. Youngworth supplied paint chips to Mashberg, and federal authorities reported that they were indeed from Rembrandt's era, but did not match oils used for the storm on the Sea of Galilee. The way Mashberg described the painting as being unfurled has also been scrutinized, as the stolen painting was covered with a heavy varnish that would not roll easily. Federal authorities and the museum began working with Youngworth after Mashberg's story was published, but Youngworth made negotiations difficult. He would not work with authorities unless his demands could be met, which included full immunity and Connor's release from jail. The authorities were skeptical of Youngworth's veracity and only offered partial immunity. The United States attorney overseeing the case eventually ceased talks with Youngworth unless he could provide reliable evidence that he had access to the Gardner works. Youngworth again provided a vial of paint chips purportedly from the storm on the Sea of Galilee and 25 colour photographs of the painting and a lady and gentleman in black. A joint statement from the museum and federal investigators announced that the chips were not from the stolen Rembrandts, though they did test as being from the 17th century paintings and could potentially be from the concert. In 2014, investigative reporter Stefford Kirkjan wrote to gangster Vincent Ferrara, Donati's superior during the gang war, inquiring if he had information about the Gardner theft. He received a call back from an associate of Ferrara who explained the FBI was wrong in suspecting the Molino gang's involvement and claimed that Donati organized the robbery. The caller explained that Donati visited Ferrara in jail about 3 months before the theft, after the latter was charged with murder, and told Ferrara that he was going to do something to get him out of jail. 3 months later, Ferrara heard news about the Gardner theft, after which Donati visited him again and confirmed to Ferrara that he was involved in the robbery. He claimed to have buried the artwork and would start a negotiation for his release once the investigation cooled down. The negotiations never occurred because Donati was murdered. Kirkjan believes Donati was motivated to free Ferrara from prison because Ferrara could protect him in the gang war. A friend of Durante also corroborated that Donati organized the robbery and that Durante, when he became concerned for his own safety, Donati was close friends with Durante. The two were seen at a social club in Revere shortly before the robbery with a bag of police uniforms. To this day, the robbers have never been identified, and the paintings have never been recovered.
34 years, it is a long time, but investigators tell me they remain busy to this day, and they tell me that they actually have more hope now that this mystery will finally be solved.
Last time we traveled to look into something was a couple of weeks ago.
As recently as a few weeks ago, investigators say they were busy investigating a tip, hoping to gather more clues that will lead them to 13 priceless stolen works of art.
I walk by the empty frames a few times every day, And it's frustrating, you know, because it's a reminder of what you haven't accomplished.
34 years after the shocking heist, the void inside the Gardner Museum is a glaring reminder of what was lost. Well-known works by Rembrandt and Vermeer and others that may not be quite as familiar.
We are trying to emphasize the lesser-known pieces, not lesser valuable, but lesser-known, like the Degas sketches.
Anthony Amore is the director of security and chief investigator at the museum. He says he has more hope today, even though the mystery has now spanned decades.
Sometimes the scariest person involved has died. So, as morbid as this sounds, sometimes the passage of time and mortality play in our favor.
That critical tip has not yet come in, but investigators hope their persistence and their patience pay off as their commitment remains as strong as it did the day the works of art were stolen.
We get a lot of calls and a lot of emails and letters, and but they're not all leads. A lot of them are theories. We're looking for the right tip, you know, that one bit of information that'll get us over the goal line.
And there is still a $10 million reward in this case. Investigators are hoping the prospect of that reward will get them over that goal line. We're live in Boston tonight. John Atwater, WCBB News Center 5.
You're watching America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
The new clues in a multi-million-dollar art heist that's been a mystery for 23 years.
Very interesting. FBI agents say they know who stole the paintings, but they are more interested in getting the artwork back. Sean Kelly has the very latest from Boston.
Their place on the Dutch Room wall is still hanging, a 23-year-old reminder of the most significant art heist in history. For the first time, the FBI says they know who cut the paintings out and stole a total of $500 million worth of artwork from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum.
FBI agents developed crucial pieces of evidence that confirm the identity of those who entered the museum and others associated with the theft who belonged to a criminal organization.
FBI Boston's special agent in charge refused to give names. Adding to the mystery, he wouldn't say if they're dead or alive.
I'm not convinced.
Journalist Stephen Kirchin has investigated the case for almost 2 decades.
If they're not on the cusp of something, they're on the trail.
Still one of your favorite mysteries?
It's the Boston's last best secret.
Whoever stole the Rembrandts, Vermeer, 13 total pieces of artwork, may have gotten away with it.
For the actual thievery that occurred on that evening, since it's over 23 years ago, the statute of limitations would have run.
This public service announcement started airing on the web in specific regions in the Northeast. The last time the Boston FBI produced a PSA for the world to see,
he has a violent temper.
It led to the capture of James Whitey Bulger days later.
The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum is offering a reward of $5 million for information leading directly to the recovery of all of our art in good condition.
The FBI's publicity campaign is for a global audience, but they'll target Connecticut and Philadelphia, 2 places they're convinced all of the artwork was taken and put up for sale in the years after the heist. In Boston, I'm Sean Kelly for ABC News.
In the 32 years since the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum was robbed of 13 works of art valued at more than $500 million, there have been many theories about who may be responsible. And for years, my next guest has felt pretty confident he had the right one. That'd be the Gardner's head of security, Anthony Amore, who joins me now in the latest developments in the case. Anthony, it's good to see you as always.
That question.
So most people think there are 2 certain things in life, death and taxes. I know that there are actually 3, death, taxes, and yet another story about someone who may have been behind this theft. We read it in the last couple of days about this guy, James Marks, murdered going into his house in Lynn in 1991. Fill in the blanks for us if you can.
Sure. Well, he was murdered in February of 1991, so it was just less than a year after the Gardner theft took place. And his name had come to us back around 2010 from a tipster who said that Mr. Marks had told that person that he had access to the Gardner art. That's not an exact quote, but he sort of gave that message to this person. Sometime later, I was able to find out that Mr. Marks was a person who had been killed by a person of interest in the Gardner theft by the name of Robert Guarenti. I spoke to Guarenti's widow, and we were able to confirm this information, worked with the state police and the Lynn police. And the fact that Marks had been talking about the Gardner pieces and also had been killed by a person who was a person of interest, raised obvious red flags for us. And then on top of that, we learned that not long after the theft, Garenti and another person of interest named Robert Gentile, who lives in Manchester, Connecticut, were in the area around the time of the Marks homicide. So all of these things come together to raise questions for us.
And you're hoping that now that it's back in the news, I know you've known about this for quite a while, that it's in the news, it may prompt other people to come forward about something. But the thing that I don't get about, well, I shouldn't say I don't get, roughly a dozen years ago, you referenced that this guy, Marks, was bragging about how he had some of the paintings, I think in his third floor apartment in Lynn, and it was searched, there was nothing there. I don't know much about criminals and mobsters and thieves, but isn't part of what you do for a living is brag to your compatriots that the biggest crime ever in the art world, or another crime, I'm responsible, I have the paintings. Isn't that something you'd expect, or no?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, we do have information that we've gathered over the years about certain people that we have great interest in having bragged, but not as much, or not to the extent where we're able to pinpoint where we can find the paintings right now. So we've said in the past, and I've said in your show, that we have a good idea who did this. We believe that we know who perpetrated the heist, but getting from point A, knowing who pulled it off, to point B, where are the paintings today, is the rub here.
You know, every single time I talk to you about this is what puts me totally over the edge. You, and I assume when you say we, you're talking about the FBI, correct me if I'm wrong, believe you know who's responsible, but you just can't get from here to there with proof. Is that right?
Right. Well, we can't get from there to where are the paintings today, which is the only question we're trying to address.
What do you mean? Because the people, the suspects are dead? Is that what your point is?
Yes, the FBI mentioned years ago that the suspects, the actual perpetrators, had passed away. But beyond that, Jim, the only goal here is putting the paintings back in frames, at least from my perspective. I work for the museum. Arrests and prosecutions aren't the sorts of things that we really care about. On top of that, the statute of limitations for the actual heist expired many, many years ago.
So why don't you say out loud who the person is if they're dead? You can't get sued for that, so that may even prompt more follow-up leads than this situation with this guy that was executed going into his house, this Marks guy. Why don't you just say the name?
We believe that it's a much more effective way for us to investigate it via going to people we know who are connected to those, instead of putting these names out there and getting flooded, and I mean flooded, with calls not just from psychics and what have you, but from con men and theorists. I don't know if the public understands the extent to which we receive calls from those sorts of people.
You know,
and they all have to be followed up on, Jim, so it's incredibly time-consuming.
You know, I, as an outsider, have followed this fairly closely, like I think almost everybody in this community has. The guy that I can't get my mind off, there was a 23-year-old guard. According to you, not somebody else, your motion detectors in the museum never detected the thieves in a room where I think there was a Manet, did detect this guard. You also said, that prior to letting buzzing the thieves in, he opened a side door. Why is he still a free man? I mean, the circumstantial evidence is pretty overwhelming, isn't it?
It's interesting circumstantial evidence. It obviously it causes one to sit up and pay attention and to investigate very thoroughly, but it's not enough to actually arrest somebody or even accuse them of a crime just based on the circumstantial evidence.
Is he part of the group that's responsible for this, according to you?
I wouldn't comment on a past employee.
You know, I am also amazed about how calm watching you now, Anthony, I've known you for quite a while. It sounds almost like your attitude is, well, we just have to continue pursuing what we're doing, and we're going to find the paintings, I don't know, next week, next month. It's been 32 years. Unless I'm misreading you, where does the level of confidence come from? Is it hope over reality, or is it reality?
For me, it's reality. But, you know, the reason is just because I know you know, all I can do, Jim, is give it my best effort and try to do everything humanly possible to get the paintings back in the best way we can. And that's what I'm doing. So that's where the hope comes from. That's where the confidence comes from. I know we're doing everything we possibly can. There's no one I won't speak to. There's no, you know, line, you know, well, this person is a dangerous person or this person is unscrupulous. No, we're doing everything we possibly can. Sure, we come up against a lot of mistruths and myths about the theft that cause a lot of problems publicly. I keep hearing people saying that if you come forward with only one painting, you get no reward. Just crazy things like this that we have to try to counter as well, but we're doing it and we're working really hard. And I also have history telling me that these things do come back and they come back a generation later, and the perseverance is the key.
Well, I hope your hope and perseverance is rewarded, and I really hope you're there the day it happens. Anthony Amori, as always, good to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Jim. Appreciate that.
With that, this case remains open, but with many unanswered questions that still remain unanswered. Please rate this show and let me know what you guys think about this and the many other cases I've covered. You can follow me on all major social media platforms, YouTube, BitChute, Dailymotion. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. Links are all down below in the description. If you have a case you'd like me to have a look at or cover, don't hesitate to send me a message. I'm your host, and this has been the Unanswered Questions podcast. Until next time. Next on Unanswered Questions. Wayne Eugene Dumond, born September 10th of 1949 and who died on August 31st of 2005, was an American criminal convicted of murder and rape. Dumond's life sentence for a rape conviction received intense nationwide attention in late 2007 when his parole became an issue for presidential candidate Mike Huckabee during the 2008 presidential campaign.